Thanks for clicking on the video. If you like what you hear, please drop a comment and say hi. It'd help me out a lot.
On the world of Riatha 9, high in the storm-carved cliffs of the Kasari Range, there stood a shrine made of bone-white stone and woven windglass. It was not large, it was not holy to the galaxy, but it was sacred to the Kasari. Inside, suspended above a pedestal of carved ivory and starwood, floated a single object, a feather, pale, wispy, fused with golden filaments along the spine, taller than a child's forearm, impossibly preserved against time. And beside it, painted in sacred orange clay, was the name. Ashari Feather, the human who gave us fire. No one had seen Ashari Feather in 3 generations, but the stories never stopped. The youngest Kasari children still heard the tales whispered around cliffside hearths, how Ashari Feather fell from the sky in a burning metal shell, bleeding and mad. How he stood between the mountain tribes and a rival clan armed with plasma lances. How he taught them how to make fire burn low for warmth instead of rage. How he gave them the stars, then refused to stay. He had been a traveler, a scout, a nobody. But to the Kasari, he became legend. And now, in the soft dawn wind that circled the shrine, a ceremony was beginning. The elder voices had gathered, the children knelt, and one figure stood taller than the rest. Wings tucked beneath ceremonial robes, trembling slightly under the weight of the roll. Her name was Kirill. She was this generation's speaker for the stars, and this would be her first time telling the story. She bowed before the feather, lifted the ceremonial horn, and began. In the time of dust and broken suns, she said, a creature of 2 legs and 1 heart fell from the sky. He did not roar. He laughed. They remembered it as a roar, but it was really a scream. The Kasari had no word for re-entry. They only knew that the sky tore open like brittle bark, and something metal and aflame came howling down into the gulch between the eastern crags. The elders had fled. The hunters readied blades and fire cloaks, but the youngest among them, curious, foolish, brave, climbed the cliffs for a better view. Kerill's grandmother had been one of them. She spoke of a great iron beetle half buried in dirt and smoke, its body cracked open like a wounded egg. Inside it, crawling forward on 2 legs and drenched in blood and fuel, was a human. The Kasari didn't know what he was. His suit was scorched, his helmet shattered, his face half covered in soot and red. He should have died. Instead, a short, ragged, delirious laugh, high-pitched and alien. Then he stood, wobbling, raised his hands like he was presenting himself to an invisible god, and then said in a language they didn't know, "Worst landing ever, 10 out of 10. He collapsed. That should have been the end, but instead it was a beginning. They dragged him from the wreck, not out of kindness, but because he was strange, and strange things needed answers. They bound him in woven cord, set a watch, waited for him to wake, and when he did, he smiled and said the first Kasari word he had ever heard, fire, then pointed to himself and said, ash. The Kasari only used fire for 2 things, battle and death. Flame was a sacred tool, a weapon to burn out infection, a purifier of corpses, a boundary between war and afterlife. So when Ashari Feather asked for it, still limping, still weak days after the crash, they assumed he meant to fight. Instead, he waved his hands at their blades, shook his head, and mimed. Cooking. At first, they were insulted. The Kasari ate roots and fermented fruit, sometimes raw game if desperation outweighed taboo, but Ashari Feather insisted. He gathered rocks, built a circle, created a small flame from a strange little tube, and coaxed it with care, like he was whispering to a sleeping child. He took a fruit, sliced it carefully, and placed it on a flat metal panel above the flame. The smoke that rose was sweet, soft. And when he finally offered a slice to the village elder voice, she recoiled. But the children? They crowded in. And the first one who tasted it, a half-feathered youngling named Chira, chirped in delight. The elder relented, and by sundown every Kasari in the cliff village had eaten a fire-cooked fruit, and every one of them had said the same thing after, he changed it. They didn't mean the food, they meant what fire was. And that night, for the first time in generations, the Kasari lit a flame that wasn't for war or mourning, it was for gathering. Ashari Feather sat beside it, eyes glassy, smiling faintly. When Kiril's grandmother asked him what it reminded him of, he stared into the flame and whispered, "My family." Then he looked up and said very slowly in Kasari tongue, "Now, you." After the fruit came the stories. Ashari Feather didn't speak the language fluently, not then, but he didn't need to. He used gestures, charcoal sketches in the sand, tiny figurines carved from flightstone, and sound. It started one evening when the village had gathered and someone asked, cautiously, what his people believed about the stars. The Kasari expected navigation, maps, charts. Instead, Ashari Feather stood, placed a stick in the dirt, and told a lie. "Once," he said slowly, "there was a creature who loved a star so much he chased it across the sky. He acted it out, the creature tripping, falling, getting back up. He kept chasing, and the star kept running." The villagers chuckled. Ashari Feather continued. Until one day the creature reached the star and found it wasn't made of fire. It was made of someone else's story, and all that time he'd been chasing a memory. The younger Kasari tilted their heads in confusion. One asked, in a chirping voice, "That's not true." Ashari Feather smiled. "No, but sometimes a good lie helps you tell the truth, and that was new." To the Kasari, stories were sacred record, or direct instruction. Their myths were warnings, their poems, prayers. But here was a creature who laughed while telling a thing that wasn't real, and somehow made it feel more honest than their oldest histories. He wasn't mocking truth, he was playing with it. And in doing so, gave them something they hadn't expected from a god who fell from the sky: permission to imagine. That night, a dozen children tried to tell their own lies, and for the first time in recorded Kasari tradition, no one corrected them. It happened on the 6th sunrise. The wind was sharp that day, not cold, just aware. The kind of wind that knew when things were about to change. Ashari Feather had healed well. He walked without limping. He had learned enough of the language to joke with the children, insult the hunters playfully, and thank the elders with bowed head and open hands. He had, by all measures, become one of them. And that frightened the Kasari more than they expected, because it meant he would leave. That morning, Kiril's grandmother, not yet an elder then, found him at the edge of the sky plateau, staring toward the rising sun with his travel pack slung over one shoulder. "Going?" she asked. He nodded once, but didn't turn. "The beacon's working again. My people come pick me up soon." "You could stay." He smiled, soft, grateful, sad. "I could, but you won't." He looked up at the twin moons fading in daylight. "I don't think I was meant to." He reached up and plucked something from the collar of his jacket, a long feather, stiff, pale, edged in gold thread. "Came off a flight harness on a training run years ago," he said. "Tucked it in after my first mission. Superstition, I guess." He turned, placed the feather in her hands. "Now it's yours." "Why?" she asked, eyes wide. He gave the smallest shrug. "Because someone once told me, if a story changes you, leave behind a part of yourself to mark it. A trade? A pact? What do we give in return?" Ashari Feather smiled, that grin the legends never got right. "You tell the story." Then he walked away. Kiril's voice echoed through the shrine. The younglings were still. Even the wind outside the archways had quieted. "And so he gave us fire," she said, "and stories that were lies, but made us truer. He gave us a feather and told us to tell the tale." She stepped back from the pedestal, breathing steady. A quiet moment passed. Then the high shrine bell rang, a tone reserved only for celestial events or off-world visitors. Kiril turned toward the archway, and there, outlined in sunlight and wind glare, stood a figure. 2 legs, a lean frame in reinforced cloth gear, backpack slung, helmet tucked under one arm. Human, but younger. Confused, eyes wide at the gathered crowd, unsure whether to bow or speak. Kiril stepped forward, wings folded respectfully. "Traveler," she said, voice careful. "You walk in a place of sacred memory. Do you come seeking something?" The human blinked. "Actually, I was just surveying Cliff Moss. I didn't mean to. Wait, did I interrupt something?" Kiril studied them. Same tilt of the head, same spark behind the uncertainty. She smiled. "Not interrupting, continuing." The crowd parted gently. She reached up, unfastened the ceremonial wrap from her shoulder, and drew out a second feather, smaller, new, but marked with the old sigil of Ashari. She held it forward. "Long ago, a human gave us a story and a feather. Now, we return the favor." The human looked stunned. "I just wanted to study moss." The children giggled. The elder voice chuckled behind a closed beak. Kirill grinned. Then take the feather and tell a better lie than he did. And just like that, a legend passed from memory into motion.